What if I told you that the world you are living in right now would look completely different if one thing never happened? No scramble for Africa, no ships arriving with guns and flags, no borders drawn with rulers, no languages forced into classrooms, no resources taken without consent. What if Africa was never colonized? Would Africa be the richest continent on Earth today? Would global power look completely different? And would history, as we know it, even exist? Pause for a moment and imagine this. Before colonization, Africa was not a dark continent. It was not empty, it was not backward. It was alive with kingdoms, trade routes, science, philosophy, medicine and culture. So the real mystery is not what Africa was, but what Africa could have become if history took a different path. Let's go back in time. Before Europe arrived, Africa was already connected to the world. The Mali Empire controlled vast trade networks of gold, salt and knowledge. Timbuktu was not just a city, it was a global center of learning with libraries holding thousands of handwritten books. Ancient Egypt had mastered engineering, medicine and astronomy. The Kingdom of Kush rivaled Egypt. Great Zimbabwe built massive stone cities without mortar. Ethiopia had its own written language and Christianity long before much of Europe. The Benin Kingdom produced bronze artworks so detailed that Europeans later claimed Africans could not have made them. Africa was not one story. It was many civilizations moving at different speeds, solving problems in their own ways. Now imagine this Africa continuing without interruption. No Berlin Conference. No artificial borders slicing ethnic groups apart. No forced labor. No mass extraction of resources. No generations growing up being told their culture was inferior. Instead, African societies continue to grow naturally. Trade expands across the continent. Coastal kingdoms develop stronger navies to protect their shores. Inland empires improve agriculture, irrigation and architecture. Knowledge spreads not through conquest, but through exchange. Would Africa have industrialized on its own? Most likely, yes. Industrialization did not begin in Europe because Europeans were smarter. It happened because of resources, political conditions and time. Africa had iron, gold, copper, fertile land, and human innovation. What it lacked was the chance to develop without interruption. Without colonization, African inventors might have developed their own machines suited to their environment. Instead of copying European models, technology would evolve based on African needs. Transportation systems might follow ancient trade routes. Cities might grow around rivers and markets, not colonial ports. Education would look different too. Instead of schools designed to produce clerks for colonial offices, education would build on African knowledge systems. Oral history, storytelling, mathematics, astronomy, medicine and philosophy would evolve together. Universities like Timbuktu would expand, modernize and connect with other centers of learning across Asia and the Middle East. Now imagine governance. Africa would not be ruled by borders drawn in Europe. Kingdoms, confederations and city-states would change naturally through alliances, trade and conflict, just like everywhere else. Some systems would fail, others would succeed. Democracy might develop differently, blending councils of elders, community decision-making and centralized leadership. There would still be wars. There would still be inequality. No society is perfect. But the key difference is this: Africa's problems would be African-made, not imposed. Now let's talk about wealth. Africa is rich, extremely rich. Gold, diamonds, oil, cobalt, lithium, fertile land, and human talent. Colonization did not create this wealth. It extracted it. Without colonization, Africa would control its own resources. Mining would benefit local economies. Trade deals would be negotiated as equals. Profits would build infrastructure, hospitals, industries, and research centers. Imagine African-owned global companies dominating energy, technology, agriculture, and transportation. Imagine African currencies shaping global markets. Imagine African cities becoming financial centers like London, Dubai, or Shanghai. Now think about language and identity. Without colonization, African languages would dominate education, science, and government. English, French, and Portuguese might still be spoken, but as foreign languages, not replacements. Literature, films, music, and philosophy would grow without the shadow of cultural shame. How different would the African mindset be if generations were never told they were less than? Self-confidence shapes innovation. Pride shapes ambition. Without colonization, Africa's youth would grow up seeing their ancestors as builders, not victims. Heroes, not footnotes. Now let's zoom out and look at the world. If Africa was never colonized, Europe would look different too. Much of Europe's industrial growth was fueled by African resources and labor. Without that extraction, Europe's rise might have been slower. Power would be more balanced. The global South and North might not exist as we know them. Slavery, as it happened, might not have reached its devastating scale. Racism, as a global system tied to colonization, might never have been normalized. The idea of one race ruling another might have remained a fringe belief instead of a global system. Global politics would be transformed. Africa would not be catching up. It would be setting the pace in many areas. International organizations would not treat Africa as a recipient of aid, but as a decision-maker. Climate discussions, economic policies, and technological ethics would include African perspectives from the start. But let's be honest, this alternate history would not be perfect. Africa would still face internal conflicts. Some empires would fall. Some leaders would abuse power. Some regions would struggle more than others. But these challenges would be part of organic development, not the aftershocks of exploitation. Now here's the most uncomfortable question. If Africa was never colonized, would the modern world be more equal? Would innovation be more diverse? Would global culture be richer? Would we still believe the same stories about progress, intelligence, and power? And here's another mystery. Even after colonization, Africa continues to rise. Despite borders, debt, and exploitation, African creativity dominates global music, fashion, sports, and culture. African entrepreneurs are building tech startups. African scientists are solving local problems with global impact. African nations are redefining partnerships. So imagine what could happen if Africa fully controlled its future. Was colonization the greatest interruption in human history? Or was it a delay, not a defeat? What paths were stolen that we will never know? And what paths can still be reclaimed? Now I want you to think, if Africa was never colonized, what do you think the richest country in the world would be today? Would global power still be centered in the same places? Would racism exist in the same way? And most importantly, do you think Africa is still capable of becoming what it was always meant to be? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because history is not just about the past. It's about the future we choose to imagine.